Dylan Beavers had an awesome start to his major league career this season. But the question is, can he keep it up? And what is his role with the 2026 Orioles? We'll talk about that coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Friday, December 26th, 2025, and welcome back in to the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we're going to continue our Orioles player season review series. And today, we talk about Dylan Beavers, who finally made his big league debut late this season, really kind of broke onto the scene for a while there, and now has himself in a good position to at least be on the Orioles opening day roster in 2026. We'll talk about what went right, what went wrong from Beavers' short stint in the major leagues, and what we should be looking for from him this offseason and into next year. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So we got away from our season review series a little bit because the Orioles kept making moves. Of course, you can go back and listen to Friday's show talking about the Shane Baz trade. You can listen to Tuesday's show from this week as we had the co-hosts of Locked On Rays, Yuli and Kevin, on to discuss Shane Baz a little bit more. Generally, teams are taking a bit of a break around the holidays here from making major moves, so it allows us to do some more of these player season review episodes. Now, full disclosure, I am recording this on Tuesday. Of course, it is posted into your feeds on Friday to make sure there was that third and final episode for you this week. If there was any crazy Orioles news that broke between here Tuesday afternoon and when you listen to this on Friday, I probably still have the time to get an episode into your feed, so make sure to check that one out as well. So let's talk about Dylan Beavers. Beavers, who was a well-regarded Orioles prospect, 2022 draft pick in the competitive balance A round, 33rd overall out of Cal, got a $2.2 million signing bonus to sign with the O's, and he was good coming up through the minor leagues. Now, John Mioli of the Baltimore Banner has done an extensive job of kind of chronicling Beavers' rise through the system and all the swing changes he has made. You know, Beavers was honest with teams, including the Orioles, throughout the draft process, saying, look, you know, I believe in myself, but I know my swing needs changing. And I think the Orioles were impressed that he already knew that, because they probably had some plans for him there too if they were going to draft him. And there were some ups and downs, but when you really look through just what he was able to do in the minor leagues, he was always productive, even with the things he was going through off the field in terms of trying to switch up mechanics and other things. He was good. And, you know, he got to AAA at the end of 2024 for a little 6-game stint. He went back there in 2025 at age 23, and he was awesome. He had a 152 WRC plus in just under 400 plate appearances in Norfolk. He walked almost as much as he struck out. He had a 304 batting average. He popped 18 homers with 23 stolen bases. And when you combine that with the fact that the Orioles did trade off a few major league hitters at this year's deadline, it was pretty much time to give Dylan Beavers that first shot at the big leagues. And that is what he got. Just after he turned 24 back in August, he was called up by the Orioles. And at the end of the day, it was a really good debut. He played in 35 games for the O's down the stretch, got 137 big league plate appearances, hit 227 with a 375 on base and a 400 slugging percentage, 4 homers, 2 stolen bases. He did in those 137 plate appearances. He did walk 26 times to 36 strikeouts. That is a 19% walk rate, which is pretty impressive. It all led to a 125 WRC plus and 0.7 FanGraphs WAR. Again, the 125 WRC plus, he's 25% better than a league average hitter in your first 35 big league games. It's pretty impressive. It's honestly really impressive to be able to come up and do that almost immediately, but that's what Beavers was able to do. So let's start with kind of what went right. And the first part is, hey, he just had a great stretch in that MLB debut. It was August 16th when he was promoted. They held him down a little longer to maintain his rookie eligibility for 2026, and he still has that. So if he does find a way to win the award this upcoming year, he could get the Orioles a draft pick. But as I mentioned, he was dominating AAA, and he deserved that call-up. And he really jumped right in. Like, it's taken a lot of these Orioles hitting prospects over the past few years, generally a couple of weeks or more to kind of settle in at the big league level. But Beavers from the jump, I mean, he had 4 hits in his first 3 major league games. And in his first 15 games in the big leagues, he was hitting .333 with a 164 WRC plus. Now, after 15 games, the league started to adjust back to him. He went into a little mini slump. But, and there was definitely a drop off in the month of September, but he showed he can hang like a 125 WRC plus. That was 8th among big league rookies who had at least 100 major league plate appearances this season. Like, he was right in there with some of the best rookie hitters in the majors this season. And one of the ways he got to that success was the plate discipline that's always been a big part of his tools as a prospect, showed up in the majors. Again, a 19% walk rate. It's kind of absurd for a rookie in his first 35 big league games. Like, even in the minors, he never walked that much in a full season. Now, of course, 35 games is a small sample size. That's not the walk rate that he is going to run for an entire season. Say Beavers gets 400 to 500 major league plate appearances next year. He's just not going to run a 19% walk rate. It's just not going to happen. But that's a good sign. Like, you look at the leaders this year, Aaron Judge led qualified hitters with an 18.3% walk rate this season. But Beavers is a guy that I can easily see running 12 to 13% walk rates, which would put him, if he's qualified, in the top 20 in Major League Baseball, because that's the kind of batter's eye that he has in there. And again, he was walking over 16% of the time in AAA in a much larger sample. He actually became the first hitter to have at least 26 walks in his first 35 big league games since Rhys Hoskins did it as a rookie for the Phillies back in 2017. He also tied an Orioles record for most walks in a first 35 games of career with those 26 free passes. That record was set by Glenn Gulliver in 1982. Difference was for Gulliver is he only played in 23 more big league games after that season. I think we can pretty easily say Dylan Beavers is going to have more of a runway than that for the Orioles next year. And the other thing that showed off the plate discipline was the low chase rate. It was only 18.9% in those 35 big league games. That was 4th lowest of any big league hitter who had at least 100 plate appearances in the majors this year. Now, to be fair, you have to always look at this when you're looking at chase rates on hitters. Are they guys who are really selective and don't swing at all? Or are they swinging at a lot of strikes and taking a lot of balls? I think Beavers, at least at this point in his career, in this small sample size, probably still falls into that first category, which is he's just generally not swinging that much. He also had the 4th lowest swing rate overall among hitters this year who had at least 100 plate appearances. And the in-zone swing rate in particular, the amount of swings you're taking at pitches inside the strike zone, is also pretty low for Beavers. So a lot of this is just that he's more of a passive hitter overall, but there is still really good plate discipline peppered in there. And I think if you find a healthy medium between getting a little more aggressive but still showing that discipline, that's when you turn into a really, really good big league hitter. And Beavers has plenty of time to do that. But when he was swinging and he was making contact, he was making the right kind of contact, which is great. He had a 37.3% launch angle sweet spot rate, which is a stat on StatCast that just kind of shows, are you hitting the ball at the right angles, which is leading to more hits? He would be around 50th in baseball if he were qualified. That's a good stat to be in. You combine that ability with, he has above average bat speed, which is always good. It's just really good bat control through the zone, which to me says he could figure to swing more, right? Again, he was very, very passive, and that led to a lot of walks, and he jumped on his fastballs when he wanted them. But I think he could stand to be more aggressive in 2026 because he's got good bat control through the zone. He can stay on other pitches, and I think would still be able to do some damage. Would he sacrifice some walks? Probably, but he's going to have to anyway. Nobody walks 19% for an entire major league season. You might as well make the most of that rate going down by being a little more aggressive. And, you had a 27% pull air rate. Those are balls that lead to the most extra base hits, the most homers, the most damage. That was 34th in baseball this year among players with at least 100 plate appearances. So all of that kind of allowed him to really settle in, especially against fastballs. He crushed fastballs. And at one point, there were questions when Beavers was in the minor leagues and undergoing those swing changes, like would all this stuff allow him to still catch up to velocity? Well, he still hit the heater this year. 297 average, 531 slugging, and just a 16% swing and miss rate against fastballs in the big leagues this season shows me he was ready for what he was going to get. And he took advantage because, again, it has put some Orioles prospects and just prospects in general in a bad spot when you come up and you get your first chance. Maybe it is only 35 games at the end of the season like it was for Beavers, but teams want you to show something to put you in a good spot heading into next year. And some prospects, even ones with talent, don't do that. And it pulls back their development timeline a little bit. Teams have to go out and look for other guys when they're trying to be winning at the major league level. But when Beavers was able to do what he did in such a short stint and a small sample size, it puts him in better standing going into next year. However, it wasn't all amazing for Beavers. A 125 WRC plus is great for a rookie. But as I mentioned, those first 15 games, he was on fire. There was a slump and there was a drop-off, and things started to look a little bit different as we went into September. We'll talk about why that was the case for Dylan Beavers coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Game Time. In the midst of basketball season, there's nothing like being in the building. The crowd, the energy, the moments you can't get just watching from the couch. The only problem is getting tickets used to be a hassle with long queues, logins, and prices changing at checkout. That's why Game Time is such a game changer. It puts the advantage back in fans' hands and makes scoring great NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. For me, I just love knowing that the price is included with all fees up front, which makes the whole experience way less stressful. None of those surprises when you get to checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. So we'll get to what went wrong from Dylan Beavers' first stint in the major leagues in just a moment. But first, I want to tell you about the Everydayer Club, right? I just want to thank you for making Locked On Orioles your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On now the #1 sports podcast network. Now, you already live your team every day. You're here. You are living and dying with the Orioles. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. You can join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Orioles with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 per month or $50 per year. Just go to lockedonorioles.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more and get involved with the Everydayer Club here at Locked On Orioles. So we gave you the run of, what went well for Dylan Beavers and why he was so successful in those first 35 big league games, but there were some issues that came up as well for Beavers. So let's talk about what went wrong for him. I mentioned how good he was against fastballs, 297 average, 531 slugging. It was a struggle against non-fastballs. Beavers hit just 045 with a 37% swing and miss rate against breaking balls. So generally sliders and curveballs and cutters that he was facing. He did not have a single hit this season in the majors against a breaking ball from a right-handed pitcher. Those guys specifically attacked Beavers down and in with curveballs and sliders, and that's how righties were able to get him out as the season went on. Now, he was a little better against off speed. That's generally going to be changeups and splitters. It was a 208 average with a 33% whiff, and he did do some damage against some hanging changeups and splitters he got this year. That was not as big of an issue. And in general, it's not a giant issue that a rookie at the beginning of their career is really only hitting fastballs, especially when he was doing so well against fastballs. That happens a lot to a lot of guys who end up being better, well-rounded hitters as their career moves on. But it was clearly a way that other teams switched their game plan, 15 games in against Beavers, and finally started getting him out. The other thing is, the rest of his batted ball data is not amazing, right? He hits the ball with a good launch angle, which you like to see. The bat speed is, a little above league average, 72.3 miles an hour. That will certainly play. You will certainly take that in the profile. The chase is really, really low. You love to see that. The whiff is not too high. But the other stuff, it's not popping off the page when you look underneath the hood a little bit more. He ran just a 28% hard hit rate this year. That would have been the 16th lowest in Major League Baseball among qualified hitters. Guys who are like a little lower than him in hard hit rate, he's in the general area of Luis Arraez, Stephen Kwan, Jacob Wilson, Ernie Clement. Those are the guys, though, that have crazy elite contact skills with very little power. They get away with dinking and dunking singles and doubles against you all day. They walk, they don't strike out, and that makes them maybe Arraez less so than he used to be, but still Kwan, Wilson, and Clement productive hitters for you. The question is that going to be the profile of Dylan Beavers? He does make similar amounts of contact that those guys do. He hits the ball a little bit harder, but it's in the vicinity of the hard hit rate. He has more pop in his bat than any of those guys I mentioned. Beavers has a chance to be a 20 home run hitter. I would be pretty stunned if any of those guys moving forward has a 20 home run season. And I think for Beavers, you can sell out a little bit more. Like, if you're going to run a 28% hard hit rate, you have to maintain such elite contact rates to survive in the big leagues. And those are the things that guys like Kwan and Wilson and Arraez have done to stay productive big league hitters, and having, albeit lower than Beavers, but very, very low hard hit rates is putting the ball in play. And Beavers has those skills where he doesn't swing and miss a ton. I just think there's more there. I don't think the 28% that we saw is what he's going to be moving forward, because in AAA this year, in, again, facing much worse pitching, but in a much, much larger sample size, he ran a 40% hard hit rate. That is pretty solid middle of the pack number that you can absolutely be a great major league hitter with and not have to make such a high level of contact that those other guys do. Will he be able to get to 40 in the big leagues after showing 28? I don't know. But if he can run, a 35, 36, 37% hard hit rate, that's still not going to be great, but it's at least going to put him in a area where he doesn't have to have Luis Arraez levels of contact to be a good major league hitter. And I think he will be much closer to that with a higher sample size, with the swing he has. It is short. It is to the point. He's not going to put up crazy exit velocity numbers, but I don't really see him being as low as a 28% hard hit rate moving forward. And then the other thing with Beavers that I think you just worry about a little bit is the defense, right? Some of the scouting reports are so up and down on what his defense has looked like in the past and what it's going to look like moving forward. What we know is he's not a center fielder. Hasn't really played that position since college. It's not somewhere he's going to stick. If he's going to be in the big leagues, it's going to be in left field or right field. And I think he can at least hold his own out there. Do I think Dylan Beavers is ever going to win a Gold Glove out there? Absolutely not. He's a little awkward, but he is athletic, and I think he can do it out there, right? It's not like Heston Kjerstad looks in the outfield. It's better than that. He finished with 0 outs above average, -1 fielding run value, essentially graded out as an average corner outfielder in his 35 big league games where he mostly played out in the outfield. He did get better as the season went on through some of the data, but it's still a pretty small sample size. But there were certainly some rough looking plays that were made out there at times. And they kind of backed up what we knew from the scouting report, where it is, you could see a world where he's a better defensive outfielder, but it hasn't all clicked yet for him out there. If Dylan Beavers is in right field for the Orioles on opening day, I'm not going to be scared of the defensive situation for the O's, but I never put him in center. I would like to see him get a little bit better out there defensively, and then I would feel better about his entire package as a player. But I do think he'll get better in the outfield. I really just think he has the tools to be a serviceable, you don't really have to worry about him outfielder. I mean, he's got 89th percentile sprint speed, so he can run, he can track a ball down. His arm strength is a little above average. That's a nice tool to have as well. And it seemed like his range was pretty average this year as well. So I think he can get better with more time in the outfield. We'll see if the O's are moving him around between right and left field, or just he's kind of stuck in one of those positions like right field when he is playing. That could be helpful if he knows when he's in the lineup it's going to be right field 99% of the time instead of switching back and forth. it's a concern, but it's not something that concerns me a crazy amount for Beavers moving forward. I think I'm much more interested in kind of what that bat can do. But with how the outfield is kind of made up right now, you have Taylor Ward and Tyler O'Neill with outfield defense questions. If Beavers does improve defensively, it gives them even a better track to playing time. And that's where I want to end this episode. Beavers had a great first 35 games, but the Orioles are getting better on this team. Where does he fit in with the 2026 Orioles? We'll talk about that to finish off the show coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays, they move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's why it makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. And live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. And FanDuel lets you jump into the moment with live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly and player props that update as guys heat up. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long at FanDuel. The game moves fast, and so can you. So it's Dylan Beavers. It was a 125 WRC plus in his first 35 big league games. The question now is, what are the biggest storylines, biggest questions for him this offseason and heading into 2026? And the first question is just, is there a starting role, if the Orioles truly believe in this production, for him on this team? Right now, you have an outfield, at least a projected outfield on the opening day roster at the moment of recording here, of Dylan Beavers, Colton Cowser, Tyler O'Neill, Taylor Ward, and Leody Taveras. There's still a question of, would the Orioles add another bat into the outfield mix? Would they reconfigure things? Do they truly trust Colton Cowser to be the everyday center fielder on this team with Taveras as the backup, or are they going to switch things up a little bit more? Cowser and O'Neill are certainly more proven out in the outfield, but if you look at the small sample, I mean, Beavers was the most productive player of those three. Now, Taylor Ward was better, and we know he's going to have a spot in the outfield no matter what. There is a chance, I think, Dylan Beavers could end up like the big side of a platoon. You could have a situation where Taylor Ward's in left field most days, Colton Cowser's in center field most days, and then you have some sort of Dylan Beavers, Tyler O'Neill platoon in right field, at least with the current way the roster is constructed. Now, there's a chance the Orioles find a way to move Tyler O'Neill. There's a chance they bring in a different outfielder after that. Like, we're still in December. The Orioles are still making moves. This is not all settled like it will be in February when these guys report to Sarasota. But Beavers did hit only 150 in his 25 plate appearances against left-handed pitching at the majors this year. Now, that is way too small of a sample size to decide whether or not he can hit lefties, but I think it's a nice way to ease a rookie in, especially when you have talent around him, and especially when you have Tyler O'Neill, who, yes, is going to struggle to stay on the field, but when he's on the field, the best thing he does is just absolutely mash left-handed pitching. So a platoon between those guys, and, Beavers as the left-handed hitter would be on the bigger side of the platoon. He would play more because you just see more right-handed pitchers than you do lefties. Maybe you even out the playing time a little bit. So, O'Neill is always playing against lefties, but he's also playing against some righties, and then Beavers is in there against the other righties. That still allows you for the more experienced bat to be in there if you keep Tyler O'Neill. And that split of playing time, I think, allows O'Neill to stay healthy. Because at this point, you're not just hoping Tyler O'Neill goes on the injured list less than he did in 2025. If he's still on your roster and going to be part of your team in 2026, you have to actively try and help him avoid getting injured. And he's never going to play 150 games even in a season. I think we've realized that. But if you can get Tyler O'Neill to stay healthy enough to play 110 or 120, that's going to help your team out a lot more. So more days off, having Beavers to be out there in right field, even if they're both in the lineup and you're DHing O'Neill so he's not out there running around in the field. It's a weird spot to be in, and he was even more injured than he's been in the past throughout the 2025 season. It was kind of a disaster year one with Tyler O'Neill, but Beavers gave you a nice little, okay, that was nice at the end of the year to have him out in right field. Now, if he does play a lot, I guess another question is, does he compete for AL Rookie of the Year? Because with the Orioles maintaining his rookie eligibility, he would get the O's a draft pick if he's on the opening day roster and then wins that award. Now, he'd be competing with guys like Samuel Basallo, Colt Emerson, Walker Jenkins, Travis Bazzana, Carson Williams, whomever maybe comes over from Munetaka Murakami is going to be in that conversation now. If Tatsuya Imai signs with an American League team, he's going to be in that conversation as well. So it's going to be tough to win Rookie of the Year. I think the bigger question is, can this offensive approach just kind of hold up for Dylan Beavers, right? Will he keep walking? Now, it's not going to be at the crazy 19%, but will he keep walking near the top part of the league? Will he still continue to make tons of contact? Or, if he settles into a little bit higher hard hit rate, one that was closer to what we saw in Norfolk, will he sell out for a little bit more power, maybe run a little bit more? Because again, he stole 20 plus bases in AAA, and then he only had 2 stolen bases in his 35 games in the big leagues. He just didn't really run in that first stretch in the majors. Maybe you open him up to do that a little bit more. Because again, he does have 89th percentile sprint speed and has shown an ability to steal a base in the minor leagues. Let's keep it going and keep him running. If he does all that, will he be a different kind of hitter? I don't know, but it will be interesting to see. Like, he had 23 steals this year. He had 31 steals in AA in 2024. I hope the O's overall can run more. Beavers can take advantage, and he can be kind of a different type of hitter that balances out this lineup even more. It's just, there's so much to still figure out as I record this here in late December for what this Orioles roster is going to look like, even on the hitting side, right? There could still be changes that happen there, even with, Taylor Ward and Pete Alonso already in the fold. And the final question really for Beavers, the biggest question is still, if he's on this team, what does it look like? Can you split him with O'Neill? Can you find equal playing time? Does that also keep O'Neill healthy and give you a good platoon? But really, is Dylan Beavers even an Oriole on opening day? I mean, there's certainly a possibility he's back in AAA Norfolk. Like, if they continue to add to the team, he has a bad spring training. He does have options. So you could easily put him back in Norfolk if you have better options. But the bigger part of that question is, would he be involved in a trade? Now, the Orioles already did trade for a starting pitcher last week when they got Shane Baz from the Rays and sent 4 prospects and a draft pick over there. And they've still held on to Kobe Mayo as a trade piece. I'm sure they'd be totally fine to move, as we've talked about. But if the O's don't get one of the top 3 free agent starting pitchers left in Imai and Framber Valdez and Ranger Suarez, we know they still need another good starting pitcher this offseason, so they would maybe turn back to the trade market. And if they're trying to get somebody a step up from Shane Baz, if they're Joe Ryan is actually available, or they're trying to get a Sandy Alcantara or a Freddie Peralta or whomever it may be, maybe those teams don't want Mayo as much, and they're really asking for Dylan Beavers. And while it may hurt because of how good he looked in his first big league stint, you think about this time last year, I think everybody would have been okay for parting with Dylan Beavers to get a major league starter. It clouds your thoughts on guys when you see how they look in small samples at the big leagues. Kobe Mayo's sample is bigger than Dylan Beavers, but Kobe Mayo's struggling in what's only been like a half big league season. I think clouds us a little bit and saying, yeah, trade him away, whatever. And for Beavers to look as good as he did in 35 games, and really it was just 15 games of being good and then falling off a little bit down the stretch, you flip it to the other side and you're like, you can't lose Dylan Beavers. He was so good. Well, that was just 35 games, right? He had a 375 on base percentage in his first 35 games. That was really, really good. Since 2015, 63 hitters in baseball have had a 375 or better on base percentage in their first 35 games. That's not a lot of hitters when you go over an 11-year stretch. But when you go back and just kind of, pick out a year of guys who did that early in their career, if you go back in time you get some pretty good names. Like, you go back to 2015, Kyle Schwarber, Chris Bryant, Corey Seager, Gary Sanchez were the guys who started their careers like that. You go into 2018, Gleyber Torres, Juan Soto, Jeff McNeil, Ryan O'Hearn. But you also get guys like Miles Straw, who can't hit at all and began his career like that. You go back to, let's say, a more recent year where guys did this. 2021, Brian De La Cruz, Trevor Larnach, Alfonso Rivas were the only 3 players that year who had an on-base percentage that good in their first 35 games. It's not a definite that just because he started out that good, he's going to continue to be that good of a major league player. And if the Orioles are really getting a true number 1 in a trade, I would be okay with putting Dylan Beavers in that deal because you still have a good outfield and you can still add other outfielders after that because we know the O's are willing to spend. I'd love to see him back on this Oriole roster. I think he's going to help next year in some sort of platoon with Tyler O'Neill if this is generally how the roster shakes out on opening day. But I'm not just completely holding him tight to the vest because it was a good 35 games. If the right deal came along that had to include Beavers, I'm okay with making the 2026 Orioles better in a possible deal like that, while knowing that there's also a chance that Dylan Beavers himself could make the 2026 Orioles better as well. That'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. We are so close to 10,000 subscribers here on YouTube. When we get there, we're going to do a fun bobblehead giveaway. One of those bobbleheads right behind me could be yours if you are a subscriber on YouTube. So make sure to hit that button. Also follow and subscribe wherever you listen. If you could leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that really helps us out as well. And if you have any thoughts on the show, you want to talk some ball, ask some Orioles questions, whatever it may be, you can always email me, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. Now, I know we're past most of the holiday season, but if you still need one of those last-minute gifts or someone keeps asking you for what you want, you can make it easy. Ask for the Everydayer Club. Ad-free episodes of Locked On Orioles, exclusive Locked On Orioles Discord server access, and more. Subscriptions can be gifted through lockedonorioles.supercast.com. I will be back on Monday. Again, remember, we're still at 3 episodes per week. Might recap some news and notes, from the last week and holiday season. If not, we'll continue with these player reviews, and we're going to talk about the Jeremiah Jackson season coming up next week. Kind of what we saw in his couple of months, and could he be good enough to just be the Ramon Arias replacement and just be this Orioles utility man off the bench next year? That's coming up on Monday. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been a Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.